2023 was a bad year for running backs. There's no way to spin that in any other direction. Only 3 of the top 12 running backs in ADP averaged 16 or more points per game. In the previous 2 seasons, there were 6 to 7 of the top 12 running backs in ADP who hit that mark. Only 5 of the top 12 running backs in ADP finished in the top 12. That's awful. And 9 of the top 24 in ADP were outside the top 30. We welcome you to Fantasy Football today, presented by BetMGM. This is part 1 of our running backs preview here. I am Adam Azer with Jamie Eisenberg, Dave Richard, and Heath Cummings. And you know what? I'm gonna try to make the case that running backs are actually safer than wide receivers, everybody. So buckle up for that. But Dave Richard, good evening to you. We're recording this on Sunday night, by the way. I know if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen, it's Tuesday for you or later. We're recording on Sunday night. Dave, how are you feeling about running backs this year?
You know, it used to not be shtick, and then it became shtick that I was like Mr. Crazy about running backs. And if we go to the pick by pick draft that we recently did, you'll think that one of my teams is still doing that shtick, but the top 12 wide receivers in PPR outperformed the top 12 running backs in PPR. It's been that way now for like the last 3 or 4 seasons as we've seen the league become more pass heavy. I still think running backs dominate non-PPR. I'm throwing a lot of my early picks on running backs in non-PPR, kind of towing the line in half PPR. But in full PPR, I think it makes sense to kind of avoid going running back early. Taking one with your first 3 or 4 picks, I think it's okay. And I think you'll like what's left at running back by the time you get to round 5 and 6. I know that's usually when the dead zone is, but I don't think that it's as bad this year. I think the dead zone comes a little later this year than it has in the past.
Heath, last year was a dramatic swing in the way running backs were drafted. Last year, we had only 8 running backs being drafted in the first 2 rounds. The 3 years before that, we had 14 to 15. So it's swinging a little bit farther, a little bit back the other way, because right now on August 4th, there are 10 running backs on Fantasy Pros PPR ADP going in the first 2 rounds. I'm doing PPR ADP, but we used to have 14 to 15. Last year we had 8. This year, as of right now, we have 10. What do you make of that?
Well, it sounds like we were right last year because the guys that we did draft early weren't any good anyway. Yes. So I think that's like, I almost feel like it's gone so far that I am drawn to start running back now because there are such good running backs available late in round 2, and I like the running backs better than I do the wide receivers. But it's been a swing that's been influenced by best ball. It's been a swing that's been influenced by the fragility of the running back position, and eventually it goes so far that the running backs become values again.
Jamie, first of all, where are you?
I'm in New Jersey. Where are you?
I'm in New York. I'm not that far. Jamie has, unfortunately, his flight was canceled. He was supposed to come home tonight, but he's a trooper because of the weather in South Florida. Flight's canceled. Jamie's going to be up in New Jersey for a little while, so his microphone doesn't sound as good as it usually does. What did you think about the way Heath says the word influenced? He says, do you say it that way?
Influenced. No,
yeah, influenced. Yeah. All right, just throw that out there. All right, Jamie, let's get to some more important things here.
Glad that's what you asked me.
Yeah,
that was a good segment.
Hey, what do you think about the running back position? Heath, what do you think? Jamie, what do you think about the way Heath talks?
I just hope my performance on this podcast is not influenced by my lack of notes from the host.
I have so many notes that I'm going to get lost in them, but is there any reason, Jamie, why Christian McCaffrey should not be the number 1 running back off the board?
I mean, there are 2, his age and his workload from a year ago, so, well, I guess 3 if his best offensive lineman and the league's best offensive lineman isn't there. So those are 3 things to have a little bit concerned about. I do think Trent Williams will get signed and will be, or will get his contract extension and will be there and ready to go and may have done so by the time you're actually listening to this. Look, he's 28 years old. He's coming off a year with 400 total touches. And the 49ers are penciling themselves in to be a playoff team and potentially a Super Bowl contender. So they want to make sure that guy is right by the time they get to, November, December, January, and hopefully February for them. So will they be a little bit more cautious by the workload that they give him early in the season? Now, it's hard to expect that because you need to win, and he's your best offensive weapon, certainly based on what the players have said. He was, I think, top 5 in the player voting for best player in the league, Tyreek Hill, number 1. look, Dave said it pretty accurately, I think, on a show recently. When you start to compare him to the receivers, the top 5 guys, you can make an argument for all 5 of those, and you compare him to Breece Hall and you compare him to Bijan Robinson. If he's right, gives you the best chance to win. And I don't know if it's not close, but it feels like it's not close. So you take, people will always say you don't want to lose your league with your first round pick. I want to win my league with my first round pick, and he's the best chance to do so. So I'm taking him first overall if I have that pick.
There's 2 things. Number one, I'm out of the poo-pooing Christian McCaffrey business. I was there a couple of years back after he had those back-to-back seasons of injuries. But the last time he had over 400 touches in a season, the very next year he got hurt, and the year after that he got hurt. So if there was a case to be made, that would be it. But I'm not saying that. Here's the other problem. Okay, let's say that I did believe that Christian McCaffrey was just like the ultimate injury risk just because of his history. Well, who else are you going to take? All right, and it's just to kind of put a fine point on what Jamie said. Are you taking CeeDee Lamb, who's currently holding out? Are you taking Tyreek Hill, who's great, but he's older than Christian McCaffrey? Are you taking Breece Hall? Aaron Rodgers is healthy. We're going to nitpick everybody else in the first round, just like we could nitpick McCaffrey, but McCaffrey's the only guy that can get you like 25 fantasy points as an average, and he could give you like a bunch of 30-plus point games. I'm taking him first overall.
Yeah, if anybody wants a little more encouragement, back in 2019, Derrick Henry had 409 touches, and 386 of them were carries. McCaffrey is coming off a 417 touch season, 331 of them were carries. So a little bit fewer touches, but more carries for Derrick Henry. You know what he did the next season? He rushed for 2,000 yards. Now, the season after that, he played 8 games. So that maybe, back-to-back seasons of grinding maybe got to him. Ezekiel Elliott, he had big workloads. He had 432 touches in 2018. He followed that up with being the number 3 running back in fantasy the following year. So they were younger, a little bit younger in their careers. I get that. But McCaffrey, it's not like it's unprecedented for a player to have 400 carries and have a huge year after that. Heath, how many running backs should go in the first round?
5. I think the answer is probably 3 to 5, depending on how comfortable you are with Jonathan Taylor and Jahmyr Gibbs. But I've got those 5: McCaffrey, Hall, Robinson, Taylor, and Gibbs, all in round 1. And I think that's probably the same answer for half PPR or full PPR.
Any disagreements?
I think only 4, with Gibbs being the 4th after the big 3.
I feel the same way. I'm thinking about whether or not Saquon would make it in a half PPR. I know he would in a non-PPR, but Saquon is my RB6. I don't think he'd make it in a half PPR. I think he'd be really close.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we're lower on Saquon Barkley than the public. The public has him in the first round as RB4, I've seen on several websites. There's a lot to talk about with Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. Gibbs, I've brought this up a lot, but I know a lot of people are new listening for the first time, just getting into it here. Gibbs was RB10 per game. Listen to this. He was RB10 per game in the last 9 games of the season after David Montgomery returned from injury. And that was with him on pace for 17 touchdowns. He just didn't. He had like 250. He was on like a 250 touch pace. He just didn't get the ball that much.
He was also RB8 per game for the season.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So I don't think we should use like the second half as the fact that he was worse in the second half as a negative against him. He was better than that for the full season, and they've talked about giving the ball more than they did last year.
But he scored 26 points or more in 2 straight games before Montgomery came back. Yeah, no, I drafted him in the first round, but I'm just saying I think you could definitely see where Schneier brought this up a few weeks ago. How many times have we had a running back go in the first round that may not even lead his team in carries? I think of Kamara. But Kamara was like an 80-plus catch guy. Gibbs wasn't even close to that last year. It's an unusual profile for a first-round running back, isn't it?
That's if it stays the same. To Heath's point, they say they're going to give him more work. Well, it either is going to come significantly in the passing game, or more likely it's going to come at the expense of David Montgomery. And I would think it's probably the latter.
All right. We're going to get to your overall running back strategy in just a moment. Dave, give me a preseason riser at running back.
I will give you Chase Brown, who, as soon as training camp opened with the Bengals, began getting first-team reps, started opening eyeballs. People on his own team obviously are going to talk him up, but the reporters that are covering the Bengals are saying that he's looking good. There's some question about just how much work he'll get over the course of the season, but he's a second year back, definitely has some juice, definitely can make guys miss with his cuts, definitely can catch the ball out of the backfield. Not that that's like the primary thing that he'll do, but Zach Moss has shown flashes, but we know that he's injury prone. I think there's a path for Chase Brown to be the best running back and the best guy to replace Joe Mixon in Cincinnati. And the draft pick that you would use to get him, I think today it's like round 8, round 9, and maybe by late August it would be in round 7. But I think he's got some huge upside.
So show of vocal hands. Who's taking Chase Brown ahead of Zach Moss? You have to say.
You're supposed to say your name.
You can say hand.
Hand.
Yes.
Okay, just two of 3 vocal hands. All right, we got some exciting stuff going on our Draftathon page, tinyurl.com/draftathon 2024. We're trying to get to 100K. We're right just a little shy of $6,000 so far, but we have big items coming up, including spots in the podcast league. They're not available yet. And also the FFT Open. I think we're aiming for Thursday to release that for entries into the Fantasy Football Today Open. So go to tinyurl.com/draftathon 2024. What should you be getting right now? You should be getting spots in a mock draft with me and only me on Tuesday night. We have 6 spots left. 5 of them are for $50. 1 of them is for $150. For $150, you can come on the live stream. We're going to be doing this draft on the live stream. I think it's going to be a PPR. Yeah, PPR mock draft Tuesday night, August 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're live streaming the draft, and one of you can be on it with me. So, and whoever else is going to be on that night. So it's $150. And also there will be a little bit of a write-up on the website about the draft, and your team will be featured in that article. So again, please go to tinyurl.com/draftathon 2024. We need people in this draft for Tuesday night at 8 p.m. PPR, $50 to be in the draft, $150 for the premium spot. Bring it on, folks. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FANTASY and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app and you sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. Overall running back strategy. Does RB work? Should you just go hero RB? What does the research say? We'll tell you after this on Fantasy Football Today.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere.
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
So this is part 1 of 2 with running back previews. And on the second one, we're going to kind of go through ADP and talk more about the players individually, probably. This one is going to be more of an overview with some sleepers and breakouts and busts. But with that said, I'll start with Heath Cummings. What is your overall running back strategy in 2024?
I don't think that you can really have one without knowing what your league's going to do. There's a very big difference between 8 running backs being drafted in the first round or fewer, or first 2 rounds or fewer in some of these expert leagues or analyst leagues, and 14, 15, 16. So it's going to be, I'm not afraid of running back this year. I'm not afraid of hero RB. I'm not afraid of zero RB. They're all viable strategies depending on what the league leads you this year.
Jamie, your strategy?
I prefer to take a hero RB approach. I'm almost certainly not taking running back. It just feels like, especially if you play in 3 receiver leagues, you're just putting yourself way behind at that position, which you're going to see most people gravitate toward that. And Heath is right. You should know your league. And 2 receiver leagues, I think, will change that because it's easier to dive back into the running back pool a little bit sooner. I found that zero RB works in this environment a lot more, especially again if you're starting 3 receivers, because with people just gravitating toward those receivers early, it just pushes those running backs down and down and down. and you could still find, running backs ranked probably 20 through 30 and get 2 of those, as opposed to in years past, you were talking about running backs 30 through 40, where you were having to go that route if you went 0 RB. So, Dave sort of touched on this earlier, the dead zone running backs have been pushed down a lot. If you're comfortable with those guys, it's fine. You're taking them a little bit later, so it minimizes the risk. But that's still the group that you're pulling from if you go 0 RB. But hero RB to me is the strategy that makes the most sense.
Okay, Dave Richard, strategy.
Well, first of all, I think running back dead zone has been pushed down because running backs have been pushed down, and so that's just common sense as far as that goes. I like hero RB as well. I'm not afraid to go with 2 running backs. You'll see that with one of the teams that I built in the pick by pick, but it was kind of because I didn't like anything else that was left, and I don't want to force a pick at wide receiver. I don't want to take, for example, I don't want to take Marvin Harrison at 12, 13. Not ready to do that. I'm not ready to take Drake London or Chris Olave at 15. I don't want to force it there. And so if I took a running back in round 1, it's probably because it fell to a spot that I was really comfortable with. And then in round 2, it's more like best value for why I would take 2 running backs. But short of that, it's hero RB, 1 stud running back, get a bunch of receivers. I know that I'm going to have a hole in my lineup somewhere. It's really hard to come out of a draft to feel like that your starting lineup is solid. Maybe in like 8-team league, 10-team league, but in 12-team league, you're going to have a hole somewhere. I'm okay with that hole being RB2, especially if I'm spending picks in rounds 7, 8, 9, going after running backs that I think I can mix and match between them and hopefully cultivate 1 good running back.
So let's say you are up in the 2nd round and you took a running back in the 1st round, which you've already said there should be 4 or 5 of those in the 1st round. McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor. Which wide receivers would have to be off the board for you to say, nope, I'm going with running back here?
In that range?
Yeah, like
I mean, it's got to be no Garrett Wilson, no Puka, and for me, no Marvin Harrison.
Right.
Okay, so that means
right.
like Olave or whoever wide receiver 10 is for you. And then at that point, you'll take Barkley and Kyron for sure, right?
I would take Barkley and Kyron over Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, Taylor. I included Taylor in the 1st round, but yeah, so.
Yeah, Taylor over them too.
You'll take Barkley and Kyron. Would you take Travis Etienne over your wide receiver 10?
Over my wide receiver 10? Yes. Wide receiver 9? No.
Right, because wide receiver 9 is Harrison, so that's
right.
kind of like a tier drop after that. So Jamie,
I would take Olave and London and Olave in that order over Etienne.
Heath, where do you come?
Yeah, I'm taking Etienne, and I've got Etienne and James Cook ahead of Barkley. But I would take all 3 of those running backs ahead of Jalen Waddle, who I think is my wide receiver 10, and Mike Evans.
I got his Mike Evans, but
yeah.
Okay, Waddle, Evans, whoever it might be. Okay, fair.
I think we all have different wide receiver 10s. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the point, is like that's where the consensus ends, and it turns into a little bit of either you've got to bet on Mike Evans repeating last year, or you've got to project some guy that's never done it before.
Mm-hmm. Might as well just take a running back at that point.
Yeah.
Although might be in like another week that it's Cooper Kupp.
Right. He's a riser. We got risers on Monday's show, which you will have heard before this one. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Speaking of risers, and this is relevant, Andy Reid was asked about Isaiah Pacheco working on 3rd down.
Yes.
And he didn't say he's the 3rd down back. He said he can do all of the things that the 3rd down back needs to do. He also said Clyde can do it, and we got some other guys that can do it. But he certainly left open the possibility that Pacheco would be the 3rd down back, which would be huge for them. Last year when McKinnon was hurt, it was a Pacheco, Clyde Edwards-Helaire split on 3rd down with Clyde getting more of the work. Maybe we'll see that again.
That's what happened in the playoffs, but they basically split red zone 3rd down snaps. That's a mouthful. And I think when they got near the goal line, it was like all Pacheco, very little Clyde. And then McKinnon came back and he took both of their 3rd down red zone snaps in the Super Bowl. But I think that is a spot where Pacheco can make some inroads.
Yeah, and it was a big deal for him when he started getting those catches.
Yeah, and he's apparently looked great in camp. I'm starting to get a little excited about him.
If if Brown and Worthy and Rice and Kelsey are all there, I'm not sure there's quite as many dump offs to the running backs. And we may go back to this. There's not very many touchdowns for the Chiefs running backs either.
Maybe on the latter point, but there's also not going to be any 8 in the box crams there. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now how many there were last year.
Is he a second round pick? Pacheco's second round pick?
I think he's a second round pick.
Yeah.
Okay. But is he a top 20 pick?
Yes.
I have him 21.
He's right there. I mean, look, once you get past whoever's your RB6, because at least ADP will tell us there's 6 our running backs going, right? The top 3 and then some combination, or maybe 7, some combination of Gibbs. Yeah, 7. Gibbs, Taylor, Barkley, and Kyron, right? So there's 7 running backs that I think are pretty much locked in.
You're looking at CBS ADP?
Any ADP.
In what area? The first round or what?
Forget about the rounds. There's 7 running backs, right?
The first half of the second round too. Yeah.
I don't really know what you mean. You mean like
there's a consensus 7 running backs that are getting drafted in whatever order, right?
Including Barkley and Kyron?
Yes.
Right. He's just talking about the first 7 running backs.
Once you get past those 7, I think there's a variety of different combinations you can see, because some people will say ETN, some people will say Derrick Henry, some people will say potentially Pacheco, potentially James Cook.
Yeah.
Achan is in that conversation. So there's a lot of guys that could be in that round 2, early round 3 range. Rashad White is another one. So it wouldn't be surprising if Pacheco becomes that 8th guy.
And by the way, James Cook is someone that you heard Heath say he's got him ahead of Saquon Barkley. Heath and Jamie like him a lot. Dave hasn't been as bullish on James Cook, but I do think that if he were available at 36 overall or something like that, Dave would probably take James Cook. James Cook is one of those guys that, like we said, Kyler Murray was probably one of our favorites on the quarterback preview based on where he was going. James Cook might be that guy for us because his ADP is 27th on CBS, but on Draft Sharks, James Cook is going 36th overall.
Woo.
On Fantasy Pros, James Cook is going 33rd overall. So we like that value a lot. I want to get your thoughts on the research I did. I kept promising sort of to try to look into what picks were safer, running back versus wide receiver. So I looked at the last 4 years, and I looked at the guys who were drafted top 12 at the positions and top 24 at the positions. Let's focus on the guys who were drafted top 12 at the positions, because I really hate going running back. But now that I think about it, I mean, is going wide receiver any safer? So let's take a look at this. The last 4 seasons, using just Fantasy Pros, overall PPR ADP, running backs have been a little bit more reliable than wide receivers. 27 of the 48 running backs who were drafted as top 12 guys finished in the top 12. That's 56.3% compared to 52%, 25 wide receivers who were drafted as top 12 guys. So it's very close. But there's one other metric I want to focus on. Usually, you can't compare points per game in PPR because that's going to favor wide receivers. But there are usually about 18 to 20 running backs who average 14 or more PPR points. And there are usually 18 to 20 wide receivers who average 15 or more. So if you want to use those numbers, it's pretty much the same. Like 14 points for a running back is pretty much the same as 15 PPR points per game for a wide receiver. Using that metric, check this out. 75% of running backs who are drafted as top 12 guys averaged 14 or more PPR fantasy points over the last 4 years. 65% of the wide receivers did.
I think there's one part of that safety equation that when you do it that way, you lose, and that's the games missed. Right. If you're talking about points per game, you're not a guy who can play 6 games and be a hit by that.
That's why I gave the first stat, because I talked about the guys who actually finished top 12 overall, not per game. So I gave an overall stat, which slightly favored running backs, and a per game stat, which greatly favored running backs. And I don't want to sit here and say running backs are safer than wide receivers. They get hurt. But I just want to kind of push back on this myth, because we are just seeing running backs go later and later the last 2 years. And I just want people to know it's not that simple. I mean, look at the wide receivers who were drafted in the first 2 rounds last year. There were a lot of misses there as well. I almost feel like running backs are being unfairly maligned, and people are going a little bit too far in the opposite direction. Anybody feel that way?
I think when we get these running back injuries, they're more devastating than they are the wide receiver injuries. At least that's the feel.
And it feels like it's more likely. Like if it weren't for injuries, I would say that more could go wrong for a receiver because they've got a quarterback that they have to rely on. But they get hurt. Running backs, when they get hurt, man, they could look at Eckler last year, who got hurt early on, came back, and really didn't look like himself for much of when he came back. That was his whole year.
I mean, look, Jefferson and Chase were the first two wide receivers off the board. They were disappointments because they missed significant time with injuries.
They were, but
Chase did not miss significant time with injuries.
He missed he missed 2 games. The year before that, he missed like 4 games.
But he was not the same without his quarterback.
Correct. Exactly. So they're tied to the quarterback too. Stephon Diggs was disappointing. Devontae Adams was disappointing. These guys, Cooper Kupp missed the first 4 games. You know,
but we were that was baked into Kupp's ADP last year.
But that's still an injury part of it, though. You know,
Garrett Wilson, because his quarterback got hurt. Garrett Wilson was a bust. You know, those guys also have to deal with their quarterback injuries.
So it comes down to which would you rather tolerate? Would you rather tolerate a running back who's just going to miss time and it's easy, you can't start him, you just got to find somebody to replace him, or a wide receiver who either he gets hurt or his quarterback gets hurt, and then you're going to be nervous about starting him if it's the quarterback that gets hurt because there's a downgrade there? Which one do you feel more comfortable with as a fantasy manager?
I'm just saying that the numbers do not. The numbers show that running back has been as safe or safer. The top 12 off the board, running back has been as safe or safer over the last 4 years. And I
think that gets back into the dead zone idea. Is like if we're going to draft 12, 13, 14 running backs in the first 3 rounds, those are probably the guys that you can count on.
That's
and then the next except only about 50% of them finish top 12 in total points over the last.
Which is the same as wide receiver.
Yeah, right. But it feels
it's a coin flip no matter what you do in the first few rounds.
But it feels to me like, Heath, like you really should try to have a stud running back, like one of the ones drafted high.
Well, I just don't know really. Like when you say stud running back, there might only be 3 this year.
And maybe 3.
Yeah. All right. I won't beat a dead horse. So Heath, you said you're okay going running back. Jamie, let me get your thoughts on that. How do you feel about your team if it starts running back?
Well, I think, your spot in the draft is going to matter too. And again, who you're drafting with is going to matter. You did it recently, I know, where you took Jahmyr Gibbs and
Taylor. Well, no, I did it twice recently. In the half PPR draft, I took Taylor, then Gibbs. In the PPR,
I'm not worried about half PPR. It's easier to get away with half PPR.
Okay, so we should establish that right now. You're in non-PPR, obviously, but in half PPR, you're like totally cool with it in that format.
I'm not totally cool with it in half PPR either. But it's easier to get away with because you're going to get more managers that skew, like Dave said. There's depends on the player, depends on the spot in the draft. You can get away with it a little bit more. In full PPR, it's a little bit tougher, but I thought you did a good job of making it work. And the way that you did it was you took a lot of high upside receivers, so there's a way to manage it, but it just, again, if it's a 3 receiver league, it's just a little tougher path to go because you're dealing with a lot of managers scooping up receivers early. There's going to be guys you can on, same thing like running backs. There's going to be guys you can on later that are going to, matter and be difference makers, but you're just minimizing that risk by taking receivers early. So that's why I feel hero RB is a little bit more of a smarter way to go because you're taking one of those running backs early, hopefully. And then you're surrounding that player with a lot of high-end receiver talent. And then you go back to the running back pool and you should be able to find somebody that could be that RB2.
I will say, like, I'm drafting in the Raz Bowl right now, and I did the most insane thing and started with 3 running backs. Breece Hall, James Cook, and Rachaad White. And I pretty much love my team. Like, maybe the receivers are going to be terrible, but right now I have T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Christian Watson, Xavier Worthy, and Jamison Williams. I mean, if you have... and we talk about this, you don't want to necessarily flex a running back in full PPR, but if that running back is a top 12 running back, I think it's probably okay.
So let me know if you agree with this. We usually don't set out to draft 2 running backs with our first 2 picks, but we're not going to avoid it just for the sake of avoiding it. If the running back makes sense in round 2, is our best player available, then fine.
I like it. Yep, I like it.
Well, Dave did a good job of it with the pick by pick. I mean, bring up his team since we're on the topic. Pick 12, right? Didn't you go running back, and then
it's not like I wanted to do that. I had every intention of taking one of Garrett Wilson or Puka Nacua and a running back.
It was
And
my fault. I forced it. I actually read the sheet wrong and thought it was Dan. And I knew Dan would take Puka and Harrison, so I took Puka thinking I would get one of the running backs, and then Dave took both the running backs.
But I don't hate what you did either, because if the majority of fantasy managers this year, regardless of what the format of the league is, which this might be a mistake, but the majority of them are going to go one running back and one wide receiver with their first 2 picks. And when you're picking late in round 1 in a full PPR league, especially when you start 3 wide receivers, you will definitely target the wide receiver, because there's going to be enough running backs from the Gibbs, Taylor, Saquon, Kyron ilk that you know for sure are going to make it back to you in round 2. So you take the wide receiver first. You play the supply and demand card. And so when that happened to me and Wilson and Nakua went 10 and 11, I didn't panic. I didn't push Marvin Harrison up my board. I took the best values that I could at running back, which were Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. And I told myself, listen, this is one of Jamie's 3 wide receiver, 1 flex leagues, and it's full PPR. I have to hammer wide receivers coming back. And so I ignored any values that were there at the running back position. And I just took 4 straight wide receivers with my next 4 picks after that.
And there's a cost to that as well, because Dave's tight ends are Brock Bowers and Pat Freiermuth, who we like one of those guys to be a low end top 12 starter, and his quarterbacks are Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins. We don't have either one of those guys ranked in the top.
Yeah, that part's a little.
So like you're going to pay somewhere if you do that.
Exactly. But I also got Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, and Rashee Rice.
Right. But
if I could do it over again, DJ Moore wouldn't be there. It would be somebody else.
So because I think this is a really important point, right? In a 3 receiver league, if you start running back, you are going to be chasing receivers. If you're in a 3 receiver league with a flex and you start with 2 running backs, you're going to have trouble getting a really good quarterback and or tight end. If you're in a 2 receiver league and you start running back, then it's easier to do. But yeah, you're just going to feel like, oh man, I'm so behind on receivers. Everyone's taking receivers because we could start 4 of them. It's full PPR. Like, you got to be aware of that. You go running back.
Right.
You may have eliminated Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud.
Right, but if he takes one tight end, let's just say he takes Bowers, since we're looking at it. So if you're on YouTube, you can see it. If not, you can see it on the site. If he just takes Bowers, let's just say, and instead of Freiermuth, I'm assuming, because Caleb Williams in that range, Tua's probably in that range.
Probably.
Purdy might be in that range.
I mean, I could have had Kyle Murray and passed on Tajay Spears.
But forget about that, because Spears could be one of your flex options. Like I thought
they were gone.
No, Murray wasn't gone.
The way you started was perfectly fine to me. I just think if your quarterbacks, instead of Freiermuth, and let's say it's, throw out a second tight end, Cole Kmet, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And your 2 quarterbacks there are another receiver, another just, Jalen Polk or somebody like that, somebody that has high upside. He might have been gone at that point, but again, you get the point. It's a very strong build.
All right. We got to take
still is, even the way he did it, but it could have been even better, just enhancing the quarterback spot a little bit.
We'll take a break and come back and talk about some more strategies and sleepers and breakouts and busts on FFT.
Never before seen matches and new rivalries unlocked. Trust me, we're just getting started. The Summer Cup is here. Let these games begin.
Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. All right, so how does your strategy? We'll go through these quickly here, guys. How does your strategy change in a 10-team league, Jamie?
What's the format? What's scoring?
That's the question. Good question.
Half
obvious question.
So I might do something similar as well in half PPR. In our non-PPR 10-team league that we drafted Monday, I actually took a hero wide receiver approach. I took Jamar Chase and then like 7 of my next 8 picks were running backs. I wouldn't go that crazy in half PPR, but you can shoot a little higher, I think, for some of the high-end running backs if you can. So even the round 2 guys, just because there's going to be more wide receiver depth.
Okay. How about a 14-team league, Dave?
Hero RB is probably the best way to go. Try and get one of them if you can, because you're going to want to be strong at those other positions that don't have as much depth.
Do you guys find 14-team leagues to be very challenging when it comes to waiver wire running backs?
Oh my goodness, of course. But I find almost every league that's not like 8-team to be somewhat challenging. 10-team is okay. 12-team, 14 league, as long as everybody's playing, man, it's tough to find those guys.
I don't think it gets more difficult than it does for wide receiver, though.
That's
there's still going to be guys that pop up as starters because of injuries that weren't rostered.
The only thing I'd push back on is that I think most fantasy managers know that running back is that's the position that you can find off the waiver wire where you can really, if at minimum, get a Band-Aid for a couple of weeks to I picked up Kyron Williams and I'm off to the races.
Yeah, but Heath, let me ask you follow up on that. So 14-team league, you say it's not any harder to find. The waiver wire is similar running back versus wide receiver. Are you talking about a 3-receiver 14-team league or a 2-receiver?
Well, I think when you get to 14-team league, it's even two receiver because there's just not that many wide receivers that pop up in the middle of the season that are really good starting options.
No, but in just
the size of your bench. The size of your bench too matters too.
Our podcast league is 14 teams, 2 receivers. And I feel like if I need to go to the waiver wire and try to get 8 to 10 points or whatever, out of a wide receiver, I can find that.
Well, you can find 8 to 10 points.
Can you? At a running back?
There's probably 7 tight ends that are going to score that next week.
No, but I mean, but that's the thing, like running back, I don't even know if you can find that. It might be nothing with running back.
There would be a Tyrone Tracy or a Theo Riddick or
I think that the thing
Theo
that
Riddick's coming back.
I get it.
The thing that happens, I think, with those leagues, Adam, and you talk about this a lot about finding guys on the waiver wire. You overspend for those guys too.
Yeah, I just feel like I try to have a little bit more depth. I try to leave my draft with a little bit stronger at running back in a 14-team league, but maybe that's just me. All right, so then it does non-PPR, half PPR, full PPR. Does that change a lot for you, Dave?
Yes. So there's 2 things that I want to point out, and these are very obvious things for the advanced fantasy and even the novice fantasy manager. But number 1, find out what the roster requirements are. How many running backs, how many wide receivers you have to start. The more wide receivers that you can start, the more you might want to prioritize that position. And we've already made such a big deal about 3 receivers, 2 receivers. That's one thing. And then the other thing is just what do catches count for? The less that catches count for, the more that you should be interested in running backs. So in non-PPR, I think almost the entire first round, not the entire first round, but the majority of the first round in non-PPR should be running backs. I think they get pushed right up because the value for the wide receivers goes down. And that has stayed true to form in fantasy for, almost forever. Like the top 12 running backs in non-PPR outperform the top 12 wide receivers in non-PPR. And when the catches get involved, of course, it's going to factor in and help the wide receivers. So know your scoring system, know your roster requirements.
I want to tell you about catches, by the way, and how many 50-catch running backs have we had over the last 8 seasons?
You love tracking this, by the way.
Yeah, because
you are like Mr. 50-catch tracker.
Because I think people are like, well, Jonathan Taylor, he's not going to catch that many passes. But if he catches 40, that's really not that big of a disadvantage. First of all, we get usually like 1 running back every year who finishes in the top 5 with fewer than 50 catches. Last year, we had Raheem Mostert, who had 25 catches. Kyron Williams was RB7 overall with 32 catches in only 12 games. In 2022, Derrick Henry was top 5 with 33 catches. So it's not that crazy. But last 8 seasons, we had 12. This is 50-catch running backs. 12, 14, 16, 13, then 8, 6. Remember, now we're in 17-game seasons. 11 in 2022. Last year, we went back up to 14, but only 8 of them had more than 52 catches. And that's a 17-game season. So I don't think you have to be like, it's not as big of a part of it, of football, as it used to be like 6 years ago. But that was just the point I was making. You don't have to freak out about your running back not getting that many catches. All right, sleepers, breakouts, busts. Heath, Jamie, Dave. My favorite sleeper running back is blank.
I will go with Ty Chandler. I saw Vikings head coach talking about how they were going to establish it this year, which would be something brand new for Minnesota, but I would expect a lot more run attempts when your quarterback's Sam Darnold or a rookie than when your quarterback's Kirk Cousins. And I don't think we have any reason to expect that Aaron Jones can handle 20 touches per game. So Chandler's one of those guys who's going to be a flex when Jones is healthy. And if something happens to Jones, I think Chandler has a chance to be a low-end RB2. He's available in round 11 or 12 right now, according to CBS ADP. Very, very good 0 RB target, and also just a fine guy to have on your bench if you have plenty of starting running backs.
Yeah, if you miss out on guys that going earlier, the Trey Benson, Zach Charbonnet, Blake Corum, Chandler goes after all those guys. Jamie, sleeper.
I'll go Rico Dowdle. We have an uncertain running back situation in Dallas, and Dowdle could easily be the starting guy there unless they make a trade or bring somebody in off the street. But by all accounts, Stephen Jones kind of crapped all over him, and then they put pads on, and he looked like the best running back that they have. There was a video circulating the last couple of days of Ezekiel. He was about to puke, but he came through one of the running back drills, and he just looked like an old man that couldn't even move. Which he is. He's an old man. He can't move.
Well, I thought he got hit in the ding, and that's why.
Oh, maybe that's what it was. I don't know. But whatever it was, looked uncomfortable for him. But yeah, Rico Dowdle could easily be the guy there behind a 30-year-old Ezekiel Elliott. So easy free space when you get to those double-digit rounds.
Dave, would you like to talk about the pole vaulter or
pole vaulter?
Yeah, the guy who his manhood hit the pole.
There's a guy who's that sounds really painful.
No, I don't think it was painful. It just like you're trying to get over the pole, like
he knocks the bar over with his.
He knocked it over. With
what?
Yeah, it's a poor. He's just playing that hard. You didn't see that?
Olympics are crazy, man.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about whatever the hell you just talked about. A sleeper for me that I've actually really warmed up to over the last week or so is Chuba Hubbard in Carolina. And it's going to hurt my chances of getting him in round whatever. Now I'm probably going to have to hope for round 9, 10, maybe 11 on Chuba, but should be the starting running back for Carolina to begin the season. All the nice things that we say about Dave Canales and what he can do for Jonathan Brooks, well, he's going to do it for Chuba Hubbard first. When Chuba Hubbard started last year, he averaged about 12 PPR points per game. I think he can do better than that. I think he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. And we don't know, A, when Jonathan Brooks is going to be back, or B, how much work will be thrust into Jonathan Brooks' lap. I'm trying to make jokes about the pole vaulter here when he does come back. So I wonder if Chuba is someone that if you're a 0 RB guy, maybe he's someone you target to just get you off to a decent start to begin the season. And I think I've made enough jokes about that thing.
Were you making a bunch of puns there?
I don't know. You're just going to have to rewind and hear it.
I look at Chuba Hubbard, the last 6 or 7, 16, 25 carries, 23 carries, 22, 16, 11, 23 carries. And he only scored more than 12.3 fantasy points once.
I think he can be better. That offensive line will be better. The whole offense in general will be better. And the price tag is cheap.
His ADP is going to skyrocket, though, after the news.
Where do you think it goes?
I think round 9 is probably a safe bet, but he's been going where?
You can just get him around 12.
5 picks behind Ty Chandler right now. Chandler's 137 and he is 142, but he's moving up and Chandler's moving down.
Which is weird because there was just a Yahoo report on top of what Kevin O'Connell said. Charles Robinson does a great job for them, is doing camp tour. And he does a little recap of all of his camp tours. And he gives a fantasy note. And he said, don't be surprised when there's almost a 50-50 split between Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler.
All right, let's go to our favorite breakouts. We'll go Dave, Heath, Jamie. Yeah, Dave, who's your favorite breakout?
Should I go back to what I said earlier in the show with Chase Brown?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think he's a more explosive version of Zach Moss, who's a more explosive version than Joe Mixon. And it's over limited sample size for Chase Brown. We've got to see if he can do that over more than just a few touches like he had at the end of last year. But younger, more juice, good pass catcher out of the backfield. I don't mind taking the chance on him on that 7-8 turn as the first Bengals running back off the board to be a breakout player this year and to be the leader in rushing and all the nice rushing sets that we like for the Bengals.
Heath, favorite breakout?
I think I will take the free square. I mean, some people haven't been listening all summer, so Bijan Robinson is the obvious breakout at the running back position. Finished, I think, RB 17 last year per game at 14.5 fantasy points per game. We're happy drafting him as RB2 or RB3 almost any time after Christian McCaffrey. Maybe you want CeeDee Lamb or Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill before those guys, but I expect Robinson, while Tyler Algier is going to have a role, I think Robinson's going way over 300 touches. He's going way over 1,500 yards, probably going to score double-digit touchdowns. And that's the expectation, not the upside. The upside is he has a Christian McCaffrey type season. And all those risks that I've mentioned when talking about the Falcons pass catchers, he's kind of insulated from those. We don't entirely know if they're going to be more run heavy or pass heavy. They've kind of said things that lean both ways. He's going to be very good either way. We don't know entirely what Kirk Cousins is going to be coming back from the Achilles. Bijan's going to be good either way.
Yeah. All right. And Jamie, who's your favorite breakout?
My favorite breakout's James Cook, but I'll go a little bit deeper just because I think it's worth talking about. But Brian Robinson, I like the setup for him quite a bit. Sharing with Austin Eckler is going to keep his ADP, I think, lower than it deserves to be. And we don't know exactly how the split's going to go, but you hear from the guys who cover the team that it could be maybe 10 touches for Eckler and Robinson getting the majority of the carries and work in the passing game. And so for someone that you can get as late as round 7 or round 8, if not later than that, I would not be surprised if he has a huge season, especially if Eckler misses time. Because we saw last year when Antonio Gibson missed time, his catches spiked. I think he had 36 catches for the season. And the majority of that came when he was the featured guy there. So I like the setup with the better offense, better quarterback. And I think Brian Robinson is going to have an opportunity to push to be a top 20 running back this year.
All right, so that's sleepers. For Jamie, it was Dowdle. For Heath, it was Ty Chandler. For Dave, it was Chuba Hubbard. Breakouts for Jamie, James Cook and Brian Robinson. For Heath, Bijan Robinson. For Dave, Chase Brown. And let's get busts now. Blank will be a bust. We'll go Jamie, Dave, Heath. Jamie, bust.
Aaron Jones for me. Even if they decide to commit to running the ball more, again, there's talk coming out of Minnesota about Ty Chandler getting more work. Aaron Jones, at his age, 29 years old, last year had a hard time staying healthy. Missed the majority of the season with hamstring issues. Came back, was fantastic in the last 5 games, including the playoffs, with 100 yards plus in each of those games. But I just don't think he's going to produce that level. So I'm still hopeful that he could produce close to a number 2 running back quality season. But based on what he showed last year with injuries, what this offense has done with its running backs the last couple of years, he's not somebody that I find myself drafting. And you see his ADP continuing to climb. And for me, I'm just out, especially if you have to draft him as a top 20 running back.
And I'm way behind consensus on DeAndre Swift. He's on his 3rd team in 3 seasons. I think that's a red flag. I think he could be sharing with 2 other running backs in Chicago. That's a problem. He's got a rookie quarterback who thrive near the goal line running the ball. That's an issue. And he's been below 14 PPR points per game 3 of the last 4 seasons. I wouldn't take him before. Honestly, I don't think I'd take him before round 8.
Okay.
So we've got a theme. I got yelled at for not being bold enough in the chat about so I'll take a first round or a second round bust. I'll take both. Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. And if you heard Jamie's, it's an older running back changing teams. And if you heard Dave's, it's a veteran running back changing teams. And the research suggests that you get a running back that's 26, 27, maybe 30, and they're changing teams. Generally, the fantasy production does not go up. In the case of Barkley and Henry, they both have quarterbacks who handle 25 to 30% of the team's rush attempts. They both in situations where the RB2 and RB3 have had bigger roles than what you would expect for a team with Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry to have. And I don't think that's going to change this year. They're still talking about how Kenneth Gainwell is going to touch the ball a little bit. Justice Hill is going to be on the field a lot. I think these guys are going to be, Barkley and Henry, much better for the Eagles and the Ravens than they are for your fantasy team if you draft them in round 1 and round 2.
Well, that's a great. There are so many running back opportunities though for the Eagles. That's the thing. It's like even with Hurts.
Well, but the question is, are there as many with Kellen Moore calling plays now?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. They're obviously going to be. They should be a really good offense, right? And the Ravens have had. Over the last 5 years in the Lamar Jackson era, I believe only the Lions have had more running back rushing touchdowns than the Ravens. Just throwing that out.
Sounds about right.
Gus Edwards ran for how many last year?
13.
A lot.
13?
Yeah.
13 and was RB 36 or something?
I'm with you entirely on that's why I was saying let's go. I'm on Henry. I was surprised about I didn't think you'd go Barkley, but I am also surprised that Barkley is a first round pick. Like that just kind of blows my mind. He's just like such an obvious second round pick to me, but on CBS, on Fantasy Pros, on Draft Sharks. He is a first-round pick.
Well, is there a running, like, you guys, I guess, are more okay with Barkley and Henry, but is there a running back that changed teams that you're higher than consensus on, or higher than ADP on?
That changed teams? Chase Brown? No, he's on it.
Nope. He hasn't changed teams. What's the consensus on Pollard?
Jacobs, probably.
Jacobs is one I'm going to be higher than consensus on.
Pollard's like RB 26-ish.
No.
Yeah, that's where I have him ranked. So I don't think
I think that
higher.
The interesting thing for this year is going to be there's so many high profile guys that change teams, so they're not all going to fail.
Yeah.
And so who are going to be the ones that sort of buck the trend, and you want to lean toward the younger ones, which makes sense. So, Jacobs is still in his prime. I think Barkley still qualifies as being his prime. Henry clearly not. So, Mixon is going to be a very popular pick for a lot of fantasy managers because he's going to a team that has a very good offense. Moss was getting some potential love. Singletary would be the guy we all forget about and does well because he just does it everywhere. It's an interesting season because of all these guys with these opportunities, and if you're opposed to that, nobody's going to be drafting, Gainwell or Shipley, whoever it ends up being in Philadelphia, or Justice Hill maybe, or Keaton Mitchell with late round picks. Nobody's really, going after those guys with any sort of, higher, expectations. It's Marshawn Lloyd is getting drafted in a pretty prominent spot for a second guy. Clearly Chase Brown is now, with Zach Moss being there and the reports, but it still feels as if the older player going to the new team, understandably so, is going to get those the higher value. It's will they live up to it? And that's the tricky part.
I'm trying to find this tweet from Schneier. It was like a retweet. I think Saquon Barkley had the same force missed tackle rate last year as Ezekiel Elliott.
Ew.
There have been some really bad trends. I mean, Barkley, I think he had 7 carries of 30 or more yards as a rookie and 5 since, something like that. He just hasn't been the same. And everyone's expecting, 7 carries of 40 or more yards as a rookie in 2018. He has 6 carries of 40 or more yards since. That's 5 seasons. He hasn't been the same player since his rookie season. People are just banking on the Philly bump, better line, better situation.
Well, it's the same with Baltimore, and I think a lot of people are hopeful. One thing in regard is, wow, the offensive line is going to be so much better in Baltimore. It may not be.
Right.
What the Titans did, and with the addition of Bill Callahan, Brian's dad, may end up being better in Tennessee this year than what it is in Baltimore. So
but they're comparing Baltimore to last year's Tennessee line.
Of course. Understandably so. But I'm saying what he left.
Linemen. They lost three starters.
What he left versus what he's going to. The team that he left, the offensive line, may end up being better. I don't know if that's going to play itself out, but it may end up being better. The thing I can't get away from with Henry is what we always talked about last year was what he did in wins versus losses. And Harbaugh averages 10 wins a year, so what he was over 20 PPR points per game in wins. Now they only had 6 of them, but it was pretty telling. When they were successful, he was successful. And hopefully it'll be the case again this year.
Okay. We can, I was going to wrap it there, but why don't we look at our pick by pick series here and finish up with that? And we won't look at all of our teams. So the pick by pick series is a 12-team draft, but it's 6 of us drafting. So we each are responsible for 2 teams. And we just kind of see how our teams come together and what we liked and what we didn't like as we drafted. So Jamie, what was your running back strategy with the first overall pick? 12+ team, PPR, 3 receivers. Go ahead.
Yeah, tough decision with the first pick to take McCaffrey. I decided to take best player available when it got to the turn for me at rounds 2 and 3. After taking Nico Collins, was my highest rated receiver, to take Derrick Henry. And so after taking 2 running backs in my first 3 picks, not exactly a strategy that I'm usually doing. I didn't take another running back again until round 10, but then, again, started just investing in it with the hope that those guys are going to carry me. But Ty Chandler, Jaleel McLaughlin, another sleeper for me, and then handcuffing McCaffrey with Elijah Mitchell. So only 5 running backs on this roster, but the hope would be is if those 2 guys are those 2 guys, then I don't have to worry about it.
So that was So out of the 1 spot, he went with McCaffrey, and then at the 2-3 turn, Nico Collins, Derrick Henry, and then did not take, this is a 3-receiver league, so maybe he would have taken a running back earlier if it had been a 2-receiver league. Did not take another running back until round 10. Ty Chandler, Jaleel McLaughlin, Elijah Mitchell backing up Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry. Elijah Mitchell, just going to look at the game log here. First, the beginning of, he never really got that shot because he got hurt. He got hurt immediately in 2022, and then they traded for McCaffrey. By the time he was back, McCaffrey was there. So, all right, let's take a look at what was the next team. Would have been my team, Team 3. Okay, I'm finally got a chance to talk about this. There is a trio of running backs. Dave just...
What do you mean, Dave just?
I saw that look on your face. You just changed my Tyreek Hill pick to Josh Reynolds. Very good.
I think that was a reach, taking Reynolds in round 1, but, it's your team. You do what you want.
There's this trio of running backs that I really love the value for. One of them, I don't quite know how I feel about them, and that's Ken Walker. But it's Kamara, Mixon, and Walker. And they seem to be in a little bit of a tier by themselves. And they're about running backs like 16, 17, 18 overall. And I hope that I can get them in late round 4 or early round 5. Because if I felt certain about it, then if I had an early pick in round 1, Kamara, Mixon, Walker, they would be dead set part of my strategy. I feel pretty good that one of them will fall to somewhere around 46th overall, which is where you pick in round 4 if you have the 3rd overall pick. So I started Hill, Waddle, Hurts. Should have been Hill, Adams, Hurts. I messed that up. And then I went Kamara. But if I didn't take him, I would have taken Mixon or Ken Walker. And then Montgomery a couple rounds later. Rico, Dowdle, Blake Corum. And I took Dowdle in round 9, but I feel like that's one of those picks where in 2 weeks, people won't be telling me I reached for Dowdle in round 9. I'm hoping there. And then Blake Corum. And J.K. Dobbins late. But yeah, that's the point I want to make about Team 3. That trio of running backs, Kamara, who I think honestly wouldn't surprise me if he's a top 5 running back per game in full PPR. I don't really see how his role is changing at all from last year. He was a top 5 running back last year. How many touchdowns did Kamara score? 4 or something? I don't know, in 13 games or 14 games?
Should go up.
More than that, probably, but not much. Kamara, Walker, Mixon. Keep an eye on that trio in mid to late round 4, and I think you're getting a steal. Heath, you had the 5th pick. You took Bijan. Okay, so you started running back here with Bijan Robinson and James Cook. And again, I'll just point this out. We like Cook a lot. You not drafting with us, no chance. But in a normal league or with other people, you might be able to get Cook in round 3. But tell us how you went about your running backs with the 5th pick.
Yeah, this is a combo, not necessarily Bijan and Cook, but Bijan or Brees and Cook that I've had a lot of. And I'm okay with it because I'm okay with Mike Evans as my wide receiver 1. I love T. Higgins as my wide receiver 2. And then it's just kind of a collection of boom bust guys, maybe, in Marquise Brown, Cortland Sutton, Brian Thomas Jr., battling it out for the wide receiver 3. Now, the reason I'm weaker in that wide receiver 3-4 conversation than Dave is because I also took Mark Andrews and Dak Prescott. So like it's going to, that's the tension point. If you start running back, because you can go take a couple of wide receivers and then you're going to kind of have to make that choice. Do I want to, I would say if a top 4 tight end falls to round 5, you just need to do that and be okay with what happens after that.
Yeah. So this again, a 3-receiver league where Heath took his first 4 picks were Bijan, James Cook, Mike Evans, and T. Higgins. If you like that start, yeah, go ahead.
I love that start, but then the other thing I'll say is like 1 to round 8-ish, I think it was. Javonte Williams still there at the end of round 8, and if the positive reports continue on him, apparently not getting cut, that's going to look like a steal. Like he's going to be going in 6 or 7 soon.
But what I wanted to say was that 2 of these guys here are really great values in drafts because again, you have to know who you draft with. There's no way Heath was getting James Cook in round 3. There's no way he was getting T. Higgins in round 5. But in ADP, James Cook is going in mid to late round 3, and T. Higgins is going like almost at the 5-6 turn. So if you like the start of Bijan, James Cook, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, that could be. You
might be able to take another player in round 2 and still get those guys.
Yeah, or round 4 and take Higgins in round 5. Okay. Dave, you had pick 6. What'd you do?
So the first thing that I want to say about this is I knew that when I would be up in round 2, there would be a running back there that I would like. So I was kind of squeamish to take a running back in round 1 because then I feel like, oh man, I might be forced into, taking the stud running back, Brees or Bijan in round 1, and then come back and get a running back in round 2, because there won't be a receiver that I'll really like at that spot. And I think that that'll be the case for a lot of people who pick early to the middle of round 2. So pick 6 through 12. If you're in one of those picks, you should expect a good running back to be there in round 2. If you're so inclined to take one, along with Marvin Harrison, of course, he should belong in there too. But that didn't happen. Brees Hall and Bijan Robinson went in the first 5 picks. Obviously, McCaffrey did as well. I took my highest ranked receiver in PPR. That was Justin Jefferson. So I was really happy about that, because then I got Jefferson, and Travis Etienne was my pick in round 2. So 1 receiver, 1 running back. And I kind of just went with a balanced approach the rest of the way. When I was up in round 3, I was considering Josh Jacobs, but I knew that the rest of my league wasn't as high on Jacobs. So I took Ayuk, and Jacobs made it back to me in round 4. I don't know if that's going to happen in a lot of home leagues moving forward. I think Jacobs will go before the back half of round 4. Another pick that I thought was a good steal for me was Zamir White in round 6. I feel like he should be going in round 5. There aren't a lot of bright spots in Raiders camp right now, but he's one of them. Bowers is sort of one of them. And the pass catching rookie Dylan Labby is one of them. And that seems to be about it. But he's one of them. And he's the guy that helped them finish 3-1 on the season last year. So I went balanced, and it was knowing that I'd be able to find a running back that I'd really like with my second round pick. That kind of was the overarching factoid that helped me put together a game plan for my draft.
First 7 picks for Dave were all running backs and receivers, 4 wide receivers, 3 running backs. Just a quick follow-up, Dave. Do you feel like you were lucky to get ETN? And if he hadn't been there in the middle of round 2, what would you have done after taking Jefferson in round 1?
Maybe a little lucky to get ETN, because Drake London went right in front of me. Jamie took him with his team that we'll hear about next. If ETN and London were gone, I probably would have taken Pacheco.
Okay.
I'm bullish on Pacheco. I think he's going to have a good year.
Team 7, so 7th overall pick was Jamie, and he went with Jamar Chase, because at this point, as Dave had said, the top 3 running backs are off the board. So he went with Jamar Chase. So this is your 0 RB team. No running backs until round 7. Now, that's Jonathan Brooks. So we didn't know at the time that he was not going to be ready for week 1. But let's take us through, your running back, 0 RB team. No running backs till round 7. That's crazy. How'd you feel about it?
I love it. Absolutely love it. And we talked about, some of the other players that I could have taken, so we're a little lower on H-An. I could have H-An in certainly round 2, but in round 3 where I took Deebo Samuel, where I took DK Metcalf, we discussed that on a previous show that I could have taken Josh Jacobs. So, could have changed some of the approach in how I built this, but I wanted to go this route, especially, once I committed to taking the 4 wide receivers. So to get Kincaid and then to get CJ Stroud. And then you see it's my next 4 picks and 5 of my next 6, 7 of my next 8, right? Or 6 of my last 8. We're all running backs. So really committed to, finding just really 2 starters. That's all I need is 2 starters with this roster. And so, yes, Jonathan Brooks is not the player that I would have taken there. Now I did take Chuba Hubbard. So at least I'm covered from the Panthers backfield, because if there's ever a backfield you want to have, it's the Panthers, but I do have that covered. But in any event, like I told you, Brian Robinson is a breakout candidate for me. As I explained on this, the last time we did this, you kind of need a couple plug and play guys that, maybe have to get a week starting out of, and Devin Singletary and Gus Edwards fit that bill perfectly, because they should be the starting guys on their team. So unless something happens early in the season, at least at the beginning, they should be the main options there. So I could, use them if needed. And then you want to take at least a swing at defense, and Braylon Allen is a lottery ticket that, may be able to win you a league if something happens to Breece Hall. So I think the way it played itself out, and even getting Curtis Samuel as a 5th receiver, he could end up being the best guy in Buffalo. So again, you have to hit on the receivers. They all have to be healthy. They all have to produce at a high level, because clearly you're chasing a position. You're not just chasing one starting spot. You're chasing a position, which is not the most ideal place to be. But if you commit yourself to this, understand you got to spend those, middle rounds on the running back spot. And for me, I like the way that I got this group.
All right, team 9. I'll make this quick, because I made a mistake in a previous draft. I had the 9th pick. We all know that for us, there's an elite 8, which is 5 wide receivers and 3 running backs. Now,
it should be an elite 9.
Well, yeah, but it wouldn't include Saquon Barkley, even though for fantasy.
No, we disrespect AJ Brown a little bit.
I mean, I think there's a clear, I would be so much happier to start my team with Amon-Ra St. Brown than AJ Brown in a PPR league. But Brown is the 9th pick. And I made a mistake earlier in a draft where I took Gibbs there. And then in the second round, I took Kyron Williams. It's not so bad to start Gibbs and Kyron Williams, but I'd rather have a wide receiver and running back there. So I did not make the same mistake twice. I don't want to call it a mistake and make it sound like it can't succeed. But for me, I didn't like the feel as much when I had running back. So at pick 9, I went A.J. Brown, and then I got Saquon Barkley. Now, my running back depth isn't that good, but I took Mahomes in round 3. So that's one of the reasons why. And I took Ferguson in round 7. And that's the other reason why. So I won't go through the whole team. I just want to say at pick 9, I like to come out of that with a running back and a wide receiver. And if you want to do that at pick 9, you should take A.J. Brown first. Although, because Barkley seems to be a first-round pick in every league, and because Marvin Harrison Jr., if you think you can get him, what is that? That's 16th overall? ADP suggests you can. There's no way he's making it there in the leagues that I play in, but ADP would say that Harrison would be there. Then you can go Jahmyr Gibbs in round 1 and Marvin Harrison in round 2. If you don't think your top 9 receivers are getting back to you in round 2, take A.J. Brown in round 1, take a running back in round 2.
Puka may fall. Just keep that in mind. He may start to fall.
And he got shaken up in practice this weekend. If there's a significant injury there, then he will fall a lot. We'll see.
Heath, pick 11.
Started with 2 wide receivers. Thrilled to get Rachaad White at the end of round 3. He's a top 12 running back for me, so a low end one, but still got one of those, even starting with 2 wide receivers and 3 of my first 4 picks. The Ramondre Stevenson pick at the end of round 5 is fine. I'm okay with it. I think he's probably going to have his best season as a rusher and see less work as a pass catcher than he's seen in the past. Love getting Jaylen Warren at the end of round 7, though. I took him 1 pick after Thomas took Najee. I'd rather have Warren than Najee, and an excellent opportunity for one of those guys. And then my depth picks, Charbonnet in the round 10 range and Antonio Gibson at the end of the draft.
All right, so there's some different philosophies. Like Jamie took 2 wide receivers with his first 2 picks at pick 7. Heath took 2 wide receivers with his first 2 picks at pick 11. Jamie just kept going and went 0 RB. Heath pretty much, started making running back a priority. Rachaad White in round 3, Ramondre Stevenson in round 5, Jaylen Warren in round 7, and he still has Kyler Murray. He still has George Kittle and Michael Pittman. I happen to like this team quite a bit, Heath. I think it's terrific. Dave, pick 12. You went running back. We already talked about this one a little bit.
We talked a lot about this team. So it's the one with Gibbs and Taylor at the top, 4 wide receivers after that. I think if we did this again, I don't think Cooper Kupp would make it to 36. And like I said earlier, I wouldn't take DJ Moore at 37. But I do want to point out that there's something I did with this team that I don't normally do. I only took 5 running backs. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I took 2 studs at the top. And I just figure as long as they're healthy, I'm never not starting Gibbs and Taylor. But maybe this is me being an old head. I still like to take a lot of running backs on draft day. I'm not taking 5 with my first 8 picks like I might have done once upon a time. I'm still trying to collect them. And I like to go after them in the mid to late rounds, of course. But it's not with the same type of gusto that I wanted to 5-6 years ago. And so you can still go hero RB or 0 RB, but I would still try to get at least 6 running backs. If you've got 14 spots, no DST, no kicker included, try and get at least 6 running backs just to load up on that position and take chances on those lottery ticket guys in the mid to late rounds. And I did that on this team. 2 guys that I took in the mid rounds were Tyjae Spears and Chase Brown.
That is it for part 1 of our running backs preview on Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday, we will have part 2. We will be recording that on Monday night. It's a wacky schedule this week, but we appreciate you being there with us. tinyurl.com/draftathon2024. Join my mock draft. And on, this is Tuesday's show. So we'll talk to you Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. We'll talk to you next time on Fantasy Football Today.